Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about a rapidly developing diplomatic crisis in the Middle East, the fallout from an Israeli airstrike in Qatar, how the UAE has reacted, and the possibility of cutting or significantly downgrading diplomatic ties with Israel, including shuttering the embassy in Tel Aviv and kicking out the Israeli envoy in Abu Dhabi. There's a lot to unpack. So let's get into what's known so far, what's being proposed, and what everything could mean. So, what happened? On 9 September 2025, Israel carried out an airstrike in Doha, Qatar, targeting senior leaders of Hamas. The strike reportedly took place in the Latakia district. Reports indicate there were casualties, including at least one Qatari security official, as well as civilians. Wikipedia, the attack was particularly controversial because Qatar has been deeply involved in mediating ceasefire efforts in the Gaza war, working with Egypt, the United States, and others. Reuters +2 Wikipedia +2 The Israeli government claims that Hamas leaders used Qatari territory as a base for operations, and that this particular meeting was part of those activities. Wikipedia +2 The Times of Israel +2 in response. The UAE summoned Israel's Deputy Ambassador, David Ohad Horsandi, to formally condemn both the airstrike and certain remarks made by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. The UAE criticized the attack as blatant and cowardly, and decried Netanyahu's warning to Qatar that Doha either expel Hamas leaders or face consequences as hostile and unacceptable. Reuters +2 The Times of Israel +2 The UAE has also asserted that any aggression against a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council (GCC) is an attack on the regional security framework. The Times of Israel +1 Now, amid this confrontation, Qatar has reportedly pushed the UAE to take stronger diplomatic measures against Israel. One element of that push is the request that the UAE close its embassy in Tel Aviv and recall Israel's ambassador Yossi Sheli from Abu Dhabi. The Times of Israel +3 The Cradle. +3 Haaretz +3 These moves would represent a major backtrack from the normalization that was established under the Abraham Accords in 2020. When the UAE agreed to recognize Israel and exchanged ambassadors. Haaretz +3 Wikipedia +3 The Times of Israel +3 How likely are these proposals? There are a few complicating factors. First, the UAE has long-standing and multi-layered ties with Israel, especially in trade, security, and diplomacy, ever since the Abraham Accords. Severing or even scaling back the relationship comes at a cost. Second, internally, there are reports of dissatisfaction with Israel's behavior and with Israel's envoy due to alleged protocol violations and other perceived misconduct. The Times of Israel +1/3 There is pressure from the region. Qatar, which was directly affected, is pushing for unity among Gulf and broader Arab-Islamic states in response to what many regard as an infringement of sovereignty. An emergency Arab-Islamic summit is expected to take this up. There's also the matter of public opinion and regional legitimacy. For the UAE, maintaining credibility among other Arab nations is important. If Israel strikes another country and other Gulf states perceive silence or inaction, it could cost Abu Dhabi diplomatic capital. On the other hand, going too far could jeopardize strategic interests, including relations with the US and Israel, cooperation in defense and trade, etc. What are the consequences if the UAE does decide to close the embassy and expel the Israeli ambassador? First, that's essentially a severing or heavy downgrading of diplomatic relations. Embassies are not just symbolic, they facilitate trade, visas, cultural exchanges, intelligence cooperation in many cases. Closing them impedes all that. Second, expelling an envoy is a strong diplomatic gesture, usually reserved for major offenses. It signals that the relationship has broken down on trust, or at least on common expectations of how states should behave. Third, the ripple effects could be considerable. It could push other Arab or Muslim majority countries to take similar steps, or lead to further isolation of Israel regionally, or provoke a counter-response. Fourth, it might escalate tensions not just diplomatically, but possibly militarily or via proxy if escalation occurs, given how sensitive the region is. As for what has definitely happened already, the UAE did summon Israel's deputy ambassador, and the UAE publicly condemned the strike and Netanyahu's remarks. Reuters +2, the Times of Israel +2, the UAE is considering the measures suggested by Qatar, such as closing the embassy. But there is, as of yet, no confirmed decision that those steps have been taken. Reuters +3, the Times of India +3, Haaretz +3, some commentators are skeptical about how far the UAE will go. They point out that normalization agreements are strategic and involve many moving parts, including international alliances, economic interdependence, security collaboration, etc. Pulling back from them could hurt on multiple fronts. Additionally, there are questions. Will closing the embassy satisfy Qatar and other regional partners? Would it risk provoking reactions from Israel, or even impacting internal UAE policy or public sentiment? And how might other global players, US, EU, etc., react? In short, what we have here is a crisis of diplomacy, a test of how far normalized relations will withstand what many perceive as provocations. The UAE is under pressure from both its regional partners and from its own domestic and strategic considerations to respond forcefully. But taking steps like shuttering the embassy or expelling the envoy is dramatic and irreversible to a large degree. For my take, this is part of a broader trend where the normalized relationships between Gulf states and Israel are being tested by recent conflict developments. It shows that diplomatic normalization does not equal unconditional alliance. Disagreements over sovereignty, military action, and public opinion still matter. It also shows the risk that actions like strikes in third-party states such as Qatar carry for broader regional stability. So, as things stand, we don't have confirmation that the UAE has closed its embassy in Tel Aviv or expelled the ambassador yet. The proposals are on the table. The pressure is real. The risk is high that something will change possibly soon. I'd encourage you to keep watching this situation closely. Observe how the UAE public messaging develops, whether there are further diplomatic moves, summons, statements, reciprocal actions, and what happens in the upcoming Arab-Islamic summit. Also worth watching is whether Qatar's role as mediator gets undermined, or whether this leads to a broader shift in alliances or policies in the GCC. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up. Share with anyone interested in Middle East diplomacy, and subscribe so you don't miss further updates on this story.